How did the bodies of older people change back in the medieval times, between the years 500 and 1500? What was it like to live through the slow decline of the physical self when medicine was still very new and based on ideas that seem strange to us now? What did medieval people see when they looked at an older relative or neighbor? Number 9. Decreased physical strength and mobility. The aging process in the medieval world was a brutal, visible assault on the body's ability to perform. People depended on their physical strength for survival, whether they were a peasant tilling the fields, a craftsman working with tools, or a knight carrying armor. As the years piled on, this strength, once a given, slowly slipped away. The muscles which had hoisted bales of hay or swung swords began to dwindle. They felt softer, less capable. A once sturdy arm might struggle to lift a heavy bucket of water from the well. A back that had carried countless loads now ached with a persistent, dull throb, even without strain. This was not just a minor inconvenience. It was a fundamental shift in a person's entire existence. Medieval observers, steeped in the humoral theory of medicine, understood this decline through the lens of diminishing innate heat and increasing coldness and dryness. The body, they believed, was like a fire. In youth, the fire burned bright and hot, making the humors, blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile vigorous and active. As a person aged, this innate heat was thought to gradually extinguish, like embers slowly cooling in a hearth. With less heat, the humors became sluggish and less balanced. Muscles were believed to require warmth and moisture to function properly. As the body grew colder and drier, the very substance of the muscles, their tone and vitality, seemed to wither. This meant that the capacity for strenuous labor, which was the backbone of daily life for most people, became severely limited. A farmer who had worked his land from dawn till dusk now found himself winded after an hour. The simple act of walking across a village square became a deliberate, slow journey, perhaps aided by a stick or a kind hand. Joints, too, suffered. Knees that once bent easily for kneeling in prayer or rising from a low stool became stiff and painful. Hips that had allowed a quick stride now felt locked and resistant. The medieval understanding was that as the body became drier with age, the natural lubricants within the joints, which they might have associated with a certain kind of moisture or phlegm, began to dry up or become less effective. This led to creaking, grinding sensations and a significant reduction in the range of motion. An old woman, perhaps once known for her nimble fingers weaving intricate tapestries, might find her knuckles swollen and gnarled, making even simple tasks like holding a needle a painful ordeal. Climbing stairs, a common feature in castles and larger homes, became a daunting challenge, sometimes an impossible one. The ability to mount a horse, crucial for travel and even local movement for some, would vanish. The consequence of this physical decline extended far beyond personal discomfort. For a peasant, the inability to work meant a direct loss of income and food. They might become dependent on their children or the charity of the community, a difficult position in a society where self-sufficiency was paramount. For a noble, while not dependent on manual labor, the loss of agility and strength could impact their ability to ride, hunt, or even attend long-standing court sessions. Their physical authority, if they had once been a powerful warrior, would also diminish. The common sight of an elderly person, bent over with a staff, moving with extreme slowness, was a stark reminder of the body's ultimate decline. It was a tangible, undeniable mark of old age, a signal to the community that a person had entered a new, more vulnerable stage of life. The struggle to rise from a chair, the effort in lifting a jug, the constant pain from aching limbs, these were the daily realities for many older people in the medieval period. A slow but relentless erosion of their physical independence They understood it not as a disease, but as the natural, inevitable outcome of time draining the vital forces from the body. Number 8. Skin and hair transformations. As the years advanced in the medieval world, the body's outer shell, the skin in its crowning glory, the hair, underwent profound and unavoidable changes. These were not just cosmetic alterations, they were clear, visible markers of age, signs that the body's fundamental composition was shifting. The smooth, supple skin of youth gave way to a landscape of lines and furrows. Wrinkles, often deep and pronounced, appeared around the eyes, across the forehead, and around the mouth. These lines spoke volumes about a life lived under the harsh sun, through biting winds, and in challenging physical conditions. Medieval people lived outdoors a great deal, and their skin was constantly exposed to the elements without the benefit of modern protective measures. This exposure would accelerate the drying and hardening of the skin. Physicians and common folk alike understood these changes through the lens of humoral theory, connecting them to an increasing dryness and coldness within the body. In youth, the body was thought to be moist and warm, full of vitality and the sanguine humor. As a person aged, this inherent moisture was believed to evaporate, leaving the body increasingly arid. The skin, as the outermost layer, would naturally reflect this internal desiccation. It became thinner, more fragile, and often developed a dry, flaky texture. What might today be called age spots or areas of discoloration would appear, marks that medieval people likely attributed to imbalances of black bile or other internal changes related to cooling. The skin also lost its elasticity, hanging more loosely in places, especially around the jowls and neck. This drooping, the result of a loss of underlying fat and galong, was a direct visual testament to the body's diminishing structural integrity. Hair, too, provided undeniable evidence of aging. The most universal sign was the transformation of hair color from its youthful shade to various shades of gray and white. This was often perceived as a sign of the body's increasing coldness. It was believed that as the innate heat diminished, the natural pigments in the hair which thrived on warmth and moisture could no longer be sustained. The hair effectively froze or dried out, losing its color. A full head of white hair, particularly if it was thick and lustrous, might be seen as a sign of wisdom and a long life. However, for many, the hair also thinned, becoming sparse, brittle, and even falling out. Baldness, more common among men, was also observed and associated with the body's drying process. A man who had once boasted a thick mane might find himself with a receding hairline or a completely smooth scalp. A woman with long flowing braids in her youth might find her hair becoming much finer and more difficult to manage, perhaps requiring shorter styles or being kept covered more often. The hair on other parts of the body might also change. For example, some older men might find their ear hair or eyebrow hair growing longer and coarser, while body hair generally became sparser. The nails, too, though not hair, are a keratinous growth and shared in the general decline. They often became more brittle, ridged, and prone to breaking. All these outward signs were not just superficial. They announced a person's age to the community, influencing how they were perceived and treated. An older person, with their wrinkled face and white hair, commanded a different kind of respect or pity than a young, vibrant individual. These changes were understood as the body's natural response to the relentless passage of time, a physical map etched onto the skin and hair, showing the journey from vital youth to the colder, drier landscape of old age. Number 7. Sensory diminishment. Life in the medieval world was intensely reliant on the senses for survival, for pleasure, and for understanding the surrounding environment. As people aged, The sharp edges of their sensory perceptions began to blur and dull. This gradual erosion of sight, hearing, taste, and smell was a significant and often isolating experience, changing the way older individuals interacted with their world. Vision, perhaps the most crucial sense, often deteriorated markedly. Older eyes struggled to see fine details, making tasks like reading illuminated manuscripts or threading a needle incredibly difficult, if not impossible. Distant objects might become indistinct, making it hard to recognize faces across a crowded market square or to spot danger approaching from afar. Medieval people would observe the clouding of the lens, which we now understand as cataracts, though they might have attributed it to a thickening of humors or a drying of the eye's vital fluids. The belief was that as the body cooled and dried, the fluids within the eyes, which were responsible for clarity, became denser and less pure. Bright light might cause discomfort, and the eyes themselves might appear watery or bloodshot, signs of the body's failing internal balance. For many, failing eyesight meant an end to intricate craftwork, to reading scriptures, or even to safely navigating uneven streets. It was a tangible loss of independence and engagement with the visual world. Hearing, too, suffered a slow and often frustrating decline. The world became muffled, voices distant, and the sounds of daily life faded into an indistinct hum. A person might struggle to follow conversations, particularly in noisy environments like a bustling tavern or busy workshop. This led to misunderstandings, frustration, and a growing sense of detachment. Family members might have to repeat themselves, shouting to be heard or resorting to gestures. The medieval explanation for this loss might again involve the drying of the body and the hardening of the delicate structures within the ear, or a blockage of phlegm, which was believed to be thicker and more abundant in older, colder bodies. The inability to hear clearly could isolate an older person from social gatherings and communal life, making them feel less connected to their family and village. Taste and smell, while perhaps less vital for sheer survival than sight and hearing, also diminished, affecting an older person's enjoyment of food and their ability to detect spoiled provisions or dangerous odors. Food might become bland and unappealing, no longer offering the same rich flavors that once delighted. A person might find themselves adding excessive amounts of salt or herbs to their meals, trying to coax out some flavor. The inability to smell smoke or putrid food could pose real dangers in a world without modern sanitation or fire alarms. Medieval people, who relied on their noses to judge the freshness of food and the quality of air, would notice this decline. It was thought that the nerve endings or passages for these senses, being susceptible to the body's increasing dryness and coldness, simply became less sensitive over time. The world, once vibrant with smells of hearth smoke, fresh bread, and damp earth, might become a duller, less nuanced sensory experience. The cumulative effect of these sensory losses was profound. An older person in the medieval period might find their world shrinking, becoming less accessible and more challenging to navigate. The vibrant tapestry of sounds, sights, and smells that defined their youth would unravel, leaving them with a muted, fragmented perception of reality. These changes were understood not as a disease to be cured, but as an intrinsic part of the aging process, a natural sign that the vital forces within the body were gradually losing their hold on the senses. Number 6. Dental decline and digestive woes. The state of teeth in medieval old age was often dire, leading to a cascade of related problems, particularly for digestion. The medieval diet was often coarse, containing abrasive elements like grit from millstones and bread, and lacking in dental hygiene practices we take for granted today. Teeth, therefore, were subjected to immense wear and tear throughout a person's life. As old age set in, the loss of teeth was almost inevitable. A person might lose them one by one, or several at a time, due to decay, gum disease, or simply falling out as the jawbone weakened and gums receded. Medieval people understood this loss as a natural consequence of the body's overall decline in warmth and moisture. Teeth were believed to be nourished by fluids from the body. As the body became colder and drier in old age, these nourishing fluids were thought to diminish, leaving the teeth brittle and less firmly anchored in the jaw. Toothache, a common affliction at any age, became an even more persistent and debilitating problem for older individuals, often leading to extraction, though medieval dentistry was primitive and painful, often performed by barbers or blacksmiths without anesthesia. The gaping holes where teeth once were, or the presence of only a few remaining, worn-down stumps, drastically altered an older person's appearance and their ability to eat. Without a full set of teeth, chewing became an immense challenge. Harder foods like crusty bread, dried meat, or raw vegetables were simply impossible to consume in their original form. Older individuals would be forced to rely on softer foods, porridges, stews, or finely chopped meats and vegetables. This limitation in diet could lead to nutritional deficiencies, especially if the available soft foods were not varied or nutrient-rich. It also meant a less satisfying and less varied culinary experience. A feast, a significant social event in medieval life, could become a source of frustration and embarrassment for an older person struggling to eat. Beyond the chewing difficulties, the medieval understanding of digestion was deeply rooted in humoral theory. Digestion was seen as a process of cooking or warming the food within the stomach, transforming it into chyle, which was then further processed to create the humors. As a person aged, their innate heat which fueled this digestive fire was believed to wane. This led to slower, less efficient digestion. Food might sit in the stomach for longer, causing discomfort, bloating, and indigestion. Older people were often advised to eat lighter, more easily digestible foods, and in smaller quantities. They might experience frequent bouts of constipation, as the body's internal dryness and reduced movement of humors were thought to impede the passage of waste. Conversely, some might suffer from chronic diarrhea, potentially related to malnutrition or unhygienic food preparation, which the medieval mind might attribute to an excess of cold, watery phlegm. The combined effect of tooth loss and sluggish digestion meant that an older person in the medieval period might constantly struggle with hunger, discomfort, and a compromised nutritional state. Their meals, once a source of communal enjoyment and physical sustenance, became a daily challenge requiring careful selection of soft foods and slow, deliberate eating. The physical reality of aching gums, an empty stomach, and a sluggish digestive system were undeniable parts of the medieval aging experience, visible signs of the body's declining ability to process and absorb the very sustenance it needed to survive. Number 5. Vulnerability to disease and frailty. The medieval period was a time when life itself was precarious, and the onset of old age dramatically heightened a person's vulnerability to illness and general frailty. The body's defenses, once robust, were believed to weaken, leaving older individuals more susceptible to the myriad of diseases that plagued medieval communities. Where a younger person might recover from a fever or a common infection, an older person's body would struggle, often succumbing to ailments that they would have easily shaken off in their youth. The core medieval explanation for this increased vulnerability was the diminishing of innate heat and the thickening or imbalance of the humors. Youthful bodies were seen as warm, moist, and well-balanced, allowing the humors to flow freely and the vital spirit to ward off external harmful influences. As age progressed, the body became colder and drier. This cooling process was thought to make the humors more stagnant, particularly phlegm, which was associated with cold and dampness. An excess of thick phlegm was believed to clog the body's passages and weaken its natural protective mechanisms. This meant that the body was less able to cook or expel harmful substances, or to generate the warmth needed to fight off invading maladies. Older people were commonly seen as more prone to respiratory illnesses, such as coughs and catarrhs, which were attributed to the accumulation of cold phlegm in the lungs. A simple cold could quickly escalate into a life-threatening chest infection. Fevers, which were prevalent due to poor sanitation and lack of understanding of germ theory, hit older bodies with greater force. The medieval understanding of fever was often linked to an excess of yellow bile or a struggle of the body to expel putrid matter in an older, weaker body. This struggle was often lost. Joint pain and conditions like gout, which were attributed to an accumulation of cold humors or dampness in the joints, became more frequent and severe, debilitating movement and causing constant discomfort. Beyond specific diseases, there was a pervasive sense of general frailty. An older person might be described as feeble or infirm, terms that encapsulated a widespread physical weakness that was more than just loss of strength. This frailty meant they were more likely to suffer from falls, with bones becoming more brittle and prone to fractures. A broken leg or arm, a serious injury for anyone, could be a death sentence for an older person who might never recover fully, becoming bedridden and vulnerable to secondary infections or general decline. The body's ability to heal itself was also believed to diminish with age. A wound that would scab and heal quickly in a young person might fester and linger for an older individual, again attributed to the lack of vital heat and moisture needed for regeneration. The concept of debility was integral to understanding medieval old age. It was not just about specific ailments, but a pervasive weakening of the entire bodily system. Older individuals, through their emaciated appearance, their slow movements, and their frequent complaints of aches and pains, were living testaments to this increasing frailty. They often needed more care, warmth, and specialized diets, if such resources were available. For many, old age meant an ever-present dance with sickness, a constant struggle against a body that was losing its battle against the elements and the internal imbalances, often leading to a slower, more drawn-out death than a sudden acute illness. Number 4. Altered sleep patterns. Sleep, a fundamental human need, underwent significant and often distressing changes in medieval old age. While sleep patterns vary greatly among individuals, the medieval understanding of aging linked disturbed sleep to the body's overall decline in warmth and moisture, and the resulting humoral imbalances. What was once a deep restorative period of unconsciousness often became fragmented, restless, and less refreshing for older individuals. The medieval theories of sleep often involved the movement and cooling of humors, particularly phlegm, which was believed to condense in the brain to induce slumber. As the body aged and became colder and drier, this process was thought to be disrupted. The natural heat that was necessary for proper digestion and bodily functions during the day was also believed to regulate sleep. With less innate heat, the body struggled to achieve the profound quietness needed for sustained sleep. Older people might find it difficult to fall asleep, lying awake for hours, or they might wake frequently throughout the night, often with a feeling of restlessness or discomfort. Waking in the early hours of the morning long before dawn was a common observation among older people. They might be unable to return to sleep, leaving them with many hours of darkness to fill. This could be a time for prayer, quiet contemplation, or simply lying awake, listening to the sounds of the night. For others, it might be a time of loneliness or worry, as the mind, unburdened by the day's activities, could wander to anxieties about their health, their family, or their future. The concept of old age insomnia was likely familiar, though not given a medical term as we use it today. It was simply seen as another natural, unavoidable part of the aging process, a sign that the body's internal clock was becoming irregular. Beyond simple waking physical discomfort, often played a major role in disturbed sleep. Aches and pains from stiff joints, coldness in the limbs, or persistent coughs due to accumulated phlegm could make finding a comfortable sleeping position difficult or wake an older person from their slumber. The need to relieve themselves during the night, due to changes in bladder control, would also frequently interrupt sleep. Without modern heating, medieval homes, especially peasant dwellings, could be extremely cold at night. An older person, already experiencing a pervasive internal coldness, would feel this chill even more acutely, making it hard to find warmth and drift into deep sleep. They might huddle closer to the embers of the fire or pile on more blankets, but the cold often penetrated to the bones. The cumulative effect of fragmented, unrefreshing sleep was a pervasive sense of fatigue and a lack of vitality during the day. An older person might appear drowsy, move even slower, and find it harder to concentrate. This lack of restorative sleep could exacerbate other symptoms of aging, making them feel weaker, more irritable, and less able to cope with daily challenges. Sleep, once a reliable source of rejuvenation, became a battleground, a source of frustration and exhaustion, another powerful indicator of the body's diminishing capacity to maintain its youthful rhythms in the face of encroaching old age. Number 3. Increased coldness of the body. One of the most pervasive and commonly understood physical changes in medieval old age was a profound and increasing sense of coldness. This was not merely feeling chilly on a cold day. It was a deep internal chill that seemed to emanate from within the body itself. This perceived coldness was central to the medieval understanding of aging, as it directly correlated with the core tenet of humoral theory, the gradual decline of innate heat. Medieval physicians and common folk believed that the human body possessed a vital innate heat that was most potent in youth and slowly diminished throughout life. This heat was seen as the animating force, responsible for digestion, circulation, and all vital functions. As a person aged, this internal fire was thought to dwindle like embers, slowly dying in a hearth. Consequently, the body became increasingly cold and dry. This coldness was not just a symptom. It was considered a fundamental characteristic of old age, the very antithesis of youthful warmth and vitality. Older individuals would experience this coldness in various ways. Their skin might feel perpetually cool to the touch, even in warm environments. Their hands and feet, particularly, might be constantly cold, a sign that the body's diminishing warmth could no longer effectively circulate to the extremities. They might complain of a persistent internal chill, a deep cold that layers of clothing or proximity to a fire could only partially alleviate. This internal coldness was also associated with a slowing of bodily processes. Digestion would be less efficient, circulation sluggish, and the overall metabolism would be thought to have slowed down due to the lack of vital heat. This pervasive coldness led to practical daily struggles. An older person would constantly seek warmth. They might spend more time by the hearth, wrapped in blankets, or huddle close to animals for their body heat. For the wealthy, warm furs and heated chambers might provide some relief, but for the vast majority of people, especially peasants, staying warm was a constant battle. The fear of catching a chill, which was believed to cause various ailments from coughs to fevers, was heightened for older individuals whose bodies were less able to generate warmth to combat external cold. They were advised to avoid cold foods, cold drafts, and damp environments. The concept of coldness also informed medical treatments and dietary recommendations for the elderly. Warm, moist foods such as stews, broths, and easily digestible grains were recommended to help replenish the body's internal heat and moisture. Warming spices like ginger or cinnamon were used. Cold or heavy foods, like certain raw vegetables or fruits, were often avoided. Warm compresses, heated stones, or simply sitting in the sun were common practices aimed at combating this internal cold. In essence, The increasing coldness of the body was seen as the clearest physical manifestation of aging, a visible and palpable sign that life's vital fire was slowly being extinguished. It explained why older people moved slower, why they were more susceptible to illness, and why their bodies felt different. It was a tangible, undeniable marker of old age, affecting everything from daily comfort to survival strategies in the harsh medieval environment. Number 2. Voice changes and speech. Difficulties. The human voice, a primary tool for communication and expression, often underwent noticeable and significant transformations in medieval old age. These changes, varying from subtle alterations in tone to profound difficulties in articulation, were understood as another physical manifestation of the body's overall decline, particularly related to the dryness and coldness associated with aging. As a person aged, their voice might become weaker, losing its resonance and carrying power. The vocal cords, like other tissues in the body, were believed to become drier and less pliable. This lack of moisture and elasticity meant they could not vibrate with the same vigor as in youth. The voice might acquire a thin, reedy quality, sometimes sounding hoarse or breathy. A once booming voice, capable of commanding attention in a crowded hall or echoing across a field, might dwindle to a soft murmur barely audible over background noise. This could make it challenging for older people to participate fully in conversations, particularly if their hearing was also diminished. They might struggle to make themselves understood, leading to frustration for both the speaker and the listener. Trembling or quavering of the voice was also a common observation. This tremor, which could affect the hands and other parts of the body as well, was likely attributed to a general weakening of the nervous system and musculature, seen through the medieval lens as a consequence of diminishing vital spirits and the body's increasing coldness. A person trying to speak with a quavering voice might find their words breaking up or their pitch becoming inconsistent, making their speech sound hesitant or uncertain. This could affect their ability to tell stories, give advice, or engage in lively debate, roles often associated with the wisdom of the elderly. Beyond mere weakness or tremor, some older individuals might experience more pronounced difficulties in speech. This could manifest as slurred words, difficulty forming sounds, or a slow, deliberate pace of speaking. While modern medicine might attribute this to neurological conditions like strokes or Parkinson's disease, medieval observers would likely have integrated it into their humoral framework. Such difficulties might be attributed to an accumulation of cold, thick phlegm in the throat and mouth, obstructing clear articulation, or to a general cooling and drying of the brain and nervous system, leading to a loss of precise control over the muscles of speech. The tongue, lips, and jaw might lose some of their agility and coordination, making it harder to produce distinct sounds. These vocal changes had significant social implications. In a society where oral communication was paramount, a weakened or difficult to understand voice could lead to isolation. An older person might be less likely to be sought out for their stories or their counsel if their words were hard to decipher. Their ability to assert themselves, to give instructions, or to participate in communal discussions might be severely hampered. A once respected elder, whose words carried weight, might find their influence waning as their physical voice diminished. The sound of an older person's voice, therefore, was not just a biological marker of age. It was a social signal communicating their changing status and their increasing vulnerability within the community. It was a silent testament to the body's fading vigor, heard in every spoken word. Number 1. Bowel and bladder control issues. The medieval understanding of the body recognized that as people aged, the control over fundamental bodily functions, particularly related to bowel and bladder, could diminish significantly. These were not just minor inconveniences. They were sources of deep personal distress, social embarrassment, and practical challenges in a world without modern sanitation or absorbent products. Such issues were directly linked to the general weakening and cooling of the body's systems. Incontinence, the involuntary leakage of urine or feces, was a feared and often unspoken reality of extreme old age. Medieval medical texts and common observations would describe the weakening of the retentive faculty, meaning the muscles and internal systems responsible for holding back waste. This weakening was understood in the context of the body's overall decline in innate heat and moisture, leading to a loss of tone and firmness in the muscles, including the sphincters that control elimination. The bladder, once able to hold urine for extended periods, might become less capable, leading to frequent urges and accidental leakage, especially with sudden movements, coughing, or sneezing. For an older person, this could mean constant dampness, chafing, and the presence of unpleasant odors. In a time when bathing was less frequent and laundry more arduous, managing such issues was a significant burden for the individual and their caregivers. Similarly, bowel control could become erratic. While constipation was more commonly associated with the dryness of old age, an older person might also experience fecal incontinence or the involuntary passage of stools. This was likely attributed to a general weakening of the bowel muscles and the lack of proper regulation by the body's diminishing vital forces, the diet often lacking in fiber, and the common issue of chronic illness and immobility would have contributed to varied bowel habits, often leading to both extreme constipation and periods of unexpected looseness. A constantly full and sluggish bowel, combined with weakened muscles, could lead to unpredictable and embarrassing accidents. The social ramifications of these issues were profound. An older person experiencing incontinence might be seen as less clean, less dignified, or even childish in their inability to control their bodily functions. They might become isolated, choosing to avoid social gatherings rather than risk public embarrassment. Their family members, particularly women, would bear the brunt of the care, including the constant washing of linens and clothing, a difficult and time-consuming task with medieval resources. Such issues could also contribute to bed sores and skin infections, especially if the older person was bedridden and not regularly cleaned and dried. Medieval solutions were limited. They might involve changes in diet to try and regulate bowel movements, or the use of specific herbs or remedies to strengthen the bladder. However, the fundamental understanding was that these issues were an inescapable part of the body's winding down, a clear sign that the physical structure was losing its integrity and its capacity for self-regulation. The inability to control one's own waste was a stark and humbling aspect of medieval old age, stripping away a layer of autonomy and independence and serving as a poignant reminder of the body's ultimate surrender to time.